Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Surprising that Pritham has not joined in. Oh yes, I take name the devil and he's here. Huh? Pritham. Okay. Pritham has joined with two accounts.
Yes, sir, I'm here. I've left that.
I was just wondering, you are always the first one to join, and today you are fourth, fifth.
Actually, sir, I'm having my convocation today.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
And I was wondering whether the class is at 9 or
Oh,
9:30. That's
oh,
why.
oh, 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 okay, okay. Well, we will start our lecture with a small clip that I found on the YouTube. Let me share it. Let me play it.
Energy is all around us, a physical quantity that follows precise natural laws. Our universe has a finite amount of it. It's neither created nor destroyed, but can take different forms, such as kinetic or potential energy, with different properties and formulas to remember. For instance, an LED desk lamp's 6-watt bulb transfers 6 joules of light energy per second. But let's jump back up into space to look at our planet, its systems, and their energy flow. Earth's physical systems include the atmosphere, hydrosphere, lithosphere, and biosphere. Energy moves in and out of these systems, and during any energy transfer between them, some is lost to the surroundings as heat, light, sound, vibration, or movement. Our planet's energy comes from internal and external sources. Geothermal energy from radioactive isotopes and rotational energy from the spinning of the Earth are internal sources of energy, while the sun is the major external source, driving certain systems like our weather and climate. Sunlight warms the surface and atmosphere in varying amounts, and this causes convection, producing winds and influencing ocean currents. Infrared radiation, radiating out from the warmed surface of the Earth, gets trapped by greenhouse gases and further affects the energy flow. The sun is also the major source of energy for organisms. Plants, algae, and cyanobacteria use sunlight to produce organic matter from carbon dioxide and water, powering the biosphere's food chains. We release this food energy using chemical reactions, like combustion and respiration. At each level in a food chain, some energy is stored in newly made chemical structures, but most is lost to the surroundings as heat, like your body heat, released by your digestion of food. Now, as plants are eaten by primary consumers, only about 10% of their total energy is passed on to the next level. Since energy can only flow in one direction in a food chain, from producers onto consumers and decomposers, an organism that eats lower on the food chain is more efficient than one higher up. So eating producers is the most efficient level at which an animal can get its energy. But without continual input of energy to those producers, mostly from sunlight, life on Earth as we know it would cease to exist. We humans, of course, spend our energy doing a lot of things besides eating. We travel, we build, we power all sorts of technology. To do all this, we use sources like fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas, which contain energy that plants captured from sunlight long ago and stored in the form of carbon. When we burn fossil fuels in power plants, we release this stored energy to generate electricity. To generate electricity, heat from burning fossil fuels is used to power turbines that rotate magnets, which in turn create magnetic field changes relative to a coil of wire, causing electrons to be induced to flow in the wire. Modern civilization depends on our ability to keep powering that flow of electrons. Fortunately, we aren't limited to burning non-renewable fossil fuels to generate electricity. Electrons can also be induced to flow by direct interaction with light particles, which is how a solar cell operates. Other renewable energy sources, such as wind, water, geothermal, and biofuels, can also be used to generate electricity. Global demand for energy is increasing, but the planet has limited energy resources to access through a complex energy infrastructure. As populations rise alongside rates of industrialization and development, our energy decisions grow more and more important. Access to energy impacts health, education, political power, and socioeconomic status. If we improve our energy efficiency, we can use our natural resources more responsibly and improve quality of life for everyone.
Well, the reason that I played this particular clip from the YouTube is you must have realized that energy is all around us. It is in the physical form, at the same time, it is also in the form, in the human form as such. We require a lot of energy, and a significant amount of energy comes from the atmosphere. Of course, the atmosphere doesn't produce it, but then it is all there around us. Okay, and that's why um, we have to learn the processes of the atmosphere, how energy plays a role as far as driving the various forces of the atmosphere. By the way, was it in this class, or I don't remember, that yesterday I said that please remind me when we start the lecture tomorrow about something. I'm just not able to recollect what I had actually spoken about. It could have been this class, or it could have been some other class. If it has been this class, you could remind me. If not, we can start with our regular presentation. And yeah, we stopped here yesterday, I suppose, a bit after this, but then getting you back to the energy aspect as such, why it is necessary for us to understand that aspect as such. Fine. So what actually happens is, because the Earth has a curved surface, one, and secondly, because the Earth is tilted at its axis. Okay, both of these combined, you will see that there is going to be a variation as far as the angle of the rays of the sun is concerned throughout the year, and that is why you're going to have seasonal changes. Okay, but if these rays are at 90 degrees or perpendicular, lamba swarupat astin, the amount of units of energy that they bring in is obviously going to be the same as the amount of energy that they would deposit on a unit amount on the land. However, if it gets slanted a bit, okay, you'll see that the same energy gets distributed over a larger surface of land. That means the same amount of energy now is dissipated over a larger surface. And in fact, if it further is say tilted, okay, to an angle of 30 degrees, you'll see from 90 to 30, okay, the same amount of 1 unit of energy gets split into 2 units when it gets distributed on the surface of the land as such. Okay, so that makes the angle of the sun's rays very important when they come to the surface as such. And yeah, yeah, somebody was asking about this yesterday, this diagram. I think
Yes, sir,
Preetham
I
was
saw.
asking about, yeah, now I remember that Preetham was asking about this. Now, normally what happens is, for this, we need to understand um, um, what is it called? Difference. What do I mean by difference? Say, for example, you have a slide, okay, and you climb up here, and of course, you're going to slide down from here as such. Now, why do you slide down? Of course, the main force is G, gravitation, okay, gravitation of the Earth. But okay, whenever okay, you and this gravitation pulls you to the mean level. Okay. Now, if this gets lower, then your mean level gets lower as such. But okay, this is going to be the mean level, and of course, this is going to be of a lower value, and this is going to be of a higher value. Okay, so when I'm going to slide from here, or I may jump also from here. Okay, I am moving from a higher value to a lower value. Normally, this happens with temperature. Because we are doing atmosphere, we need to remember this. This happens with pressure. Okay, and of course, for a geography student, it is so very primary to understand that it happens from a higher value of elevation to a lower value of elevation as such. You're going to move from a higher value to a lower value as such. Now, coming to this diagram, okay, here is where you're going to have a higher value of insolation, incoming solar radiation. And here is where these 2 points where you are going to have a lower value of insolation. Now, this is a hypothetical diagram. I presume it's because of that confused Preetham yesterday, because you'll see that it is, in fact, when we speak about the Hadley cell, okay, we're going to speak about it when we speak about pressure belts and wind systems at a later such. But the original idea of Hadley was that this okay, energy is moving to the poles, and then from the poles it is moving this. So this is one cell. This is called as a single cell model by Hadley as such. But going by what we had done earlier, sorry, here that this is going to move from a higher value to a lower value. Hypothetically, we can say that this higher value of insolation will move towards this, okay, and uh, the movement of air particles, let me tell you, is not this way. The movement of air particles is not this way. They are just referring to energy. Okay, so the energy is supposed to move from a higher value to a lower value. Okay, so the arrows don't mean the movement of air particles. It is just the movement of energy as such. As a consequence, you have a surplus of energy from around, say, 38 degrees in the southern hemisphere and till around 40 degrees. Again, now this is going to be this. There is no absolute mathematical division about this, but around about that. Okay, and I said that as far as the southern hemisphere is concerned, it is called as the water hemisphere, and the northern hemisphere is concerned, it is called as the land hemisphere. Land has a capacity to hold on to or get heated faster as compared to water, and that is why this energy tends to get surplused to a higher latitude as compared to the latitude you can see in the southern hemisphere as such. So this is something that we need to keep in mind, that the energy flow is going to be in that particular way. Now, yesterday I stopped at this particular diagram saying that tomorrow we are going to look into what is called as the climograph. And it's not exactly the climograph as such. The climograph will include the precipitation in these regions also. This is just the mean temperatures, mean monthly temperatures of respective places in different points. Now, when I was speaking about this with my BSc students, I had made up my mind that I would come up with a world map showing where exactly these places are. Unfortunately, I could not, I remember that later. But in a fair sense, you'll see that if this is the Earth and this is the equator, Point Barrow in Alaska, let us say this is America, this is Africa, and this is going to be Asia, etc. This is Europe, and so on and so forth. Let us say this is, sorry, it's this way, right? So this is North America. Now, Point Barrow, Alaska is going to be somewhere here. Okay, this is need to be around Winnipeg, Manitoba is in somewhere in Canada. That's going to be number 2. That's 50 degrees. Okay, north. This is 71 degrees. So number 2 is obviously going to be nearer the equator. Then we come to, of course, this is a bit down here, Cape Town. Or before that, this is Winnipeg, this is Point Barrow, and this is number 3. This is St. Louis in Missouri. Missouri is somewhere here. Okay, so that's number 3, much nearer. And then you have Iquitos in Peru. Okay, now if I would have been fair enough, okay, you'll see that this is the equator, let us say, and this is where Peru would be in southern hemisphere. This is number 4. And number 5 is going to be Cape Town. Cape Town is going to be further down here. Okay, this is going to be Madagascar. So Cape Town is right all the way here. This is Antarctica. So Cape Town is number 5. So 2 places in the southern hemisphere, 3 places in the northern hemisphere. In fact, this diagram, if you remember the presentation I made on climatic regions, you remember that, and we add this to that. A lot of things about climatology should be clear to you all with that reference as such. Now, let us start with them one by one. Okay, Point Barrow, this is the farthest of all these. Okay, this is in the northern hemisphere. Now, what are these temperatures? Now, this is in centigrade. So, northern hemisphere, of course, November, December, or October onwards year, okay, till March, you're going to have the winter of the northern hemisphere, and then you're going to have these months of summer. Okay, now you'll see that as far as the summer months are concerned, the temperatures tend to rise all the way up, and then they start falling on the other side. They fall much rapidly after October, and in fact they stay much below the normals as far as the cold months of December is cold months of Jan, Feb, and March is concerned. Now if we use logic, okay, or if you go by common sense first, let us say the winter solstice is 21st of December, right? So the sun is going to be way down in the southern hemisphere in December, and after that it starts coming northwards. Now if it is coming northwards, okay, why is it that this fall in temperature is experienced in January, February, and March rather than in December as such? Remember that there is a lag. Always remember that there is going to be a lag. So your coldest temperatures, okay, during the winter of the northern hemisphere, coldest temperatures during the winter of the northern hemisphere are going to be around February, not even Jan. You'll see that the coldest temperatures are going to be around Feb. Now this Point Barrow, there could be a local cause for this. It shows that for Point Barrow, the coldest temperature is in Jan. But otherwise, let me tell you that I'll just scrape this off. Yeah, so for Point Barrow, the coldest temperature is in Jan. Okay, however, the farthest of the angle of the sun has already happened in December. Okay, so we have to remember always that there is a lag. Similarly, the hottest months, and I'm going to come to that, and it's going to be a very interesting observation here. The hottest months are supposed to be in June, because 21st of June is your summer solstice. But you'll see that the warmest of the months temperatures tend to be after June as such. Again, there is a lag as such. Now, what this lag is, we'll go into dealing with this lag when we actually start with the core of the processes of the atmospheric happenings as such. Then you'll see that after April, okay, there is a steeper rise, okay, all the way up here. But whatever the rise, the warmest of the months, you'll see that for this also it is true that the warmest of the month is July, and the warmest temperatures are 4 degrees only. So from -28, around -28 degrees, it comes up all the way to +4. And then, of course, the next half of months, okay, that's the next 6 months, it keeps on significantly falling. Okay, so it's only between this and this, that's June and September, that the temperatures at Point Barrow happen to be above 4 degrees. Now above 0 degrees as such. Otherwise, these the rest of the 1, 2, 3, 4, the rest of the 8 months, it's always going to be below uh, 0 degrees as such. Okay, remember these are mean temperatures. The daily high and low could vary as such, but the annual variation is significant. You'll see that from -28 to 4. We spoke about this annual variation in our earlier presentation also. So there is a difference of nearly 32 degrees centigrade. Okay, and this 32 degrees is very harsh as far as plants is concerned. If it is harsh on plants, it is going to be harsh on animals. The animal life is going to be less. So temperatures play an important role. Okay, and temperatures are dependent on the energy that comes from the sun as such. Okay, um, then we come to the next of these places. That was number two, and that number two was this particular place, Manitoba. It is nearer to the equator, a bit more, 20 degrees away from the poles and 20 degrees near. As a consequence, you'll see that though the coldest of the months happens to be January, but it is -16 as compared to -10. So it gets warmer by 12 degrees. And in fact, you'll see that it keeps on warming up all the way up here. And as compared to the max temperature here, which was in July, now you'll see that the max temperature comes to somewhere between July and August. And going in the same connection, the max temperatures for this particular place, that St. Louis in Missouri, which is further nearer to the equator, you'll see that the max temperatures are higher. So the nearer you are to the equator, the higher the temperatures you may get. But it may not necessarily be a thumb rule that if you are, particularly if you are on the equator, that your temperatures could be high. Okay, and that is proven here that though Iquitos in Peru is at 4 degrees, the nearest to the equator, I would say, but the highest of the temperatures tend to be around 39 degrees. That's a very interesting observation. And let me tell you that around 35 degrees to 40 degrees, you're going to have the hot deserts. The hot deserts of the world are here. So this is nearby that particular zone, and that is why the temperatures are significantly higher. Okay, and as far as Peru is concerned, it is we could say that it is on the equator, nearly on the equator, or we could definitely say that it is in the equatorial belt. In spite of that, leave aside this location. If you see the temperature, okay, you'll see that the variation in temperature, it doesn't fall below 24 degrees, and it doesn't rise above what 25, 26, around 26 degrees. So the variation is just 2 degrees. Just 2 degrees. These are some important things that we have to keep in mind, okay, while we are understanding all this. Okay, this is the equator, and let us say this would be the South America, and this is going to be North America, and so on and so forth. I'm drawing these two only because that majority of the places are here. And okay, let me bring in South Africa also as a continent here. So Peru is going to be, or Iquitos is going to be so near. This is St. Louis. Okay, this is Winnipeg, Manitoba, and Alaska is going to be somewhere here. Point Barrow, Alaska is going to be somewhere here. This is your Cape Town. These are our 5 points of interest as such. Okay, so in spite of the fact that this is nearer to the equator, in spite of the fact that the equator has a very high insolation, you'll see that the temperatures are not there. They're controlled by a particular phenomena. I think I've spoken about it earlier. You will remember that, or if not, we will be doing it at some other point also as such. Okay, so one thing we have to remember, that as you go towards the equator, it is peaking, and of course the peak time is also shifting a bit. There is going to be a lag. Okay, always there is going to be a lag as such. Then I'll just come back to these. You'll see that these are parallel to each other. Okay, but the difference grows here. Okay, that's the summer months. Otherwise, they tend to be parallel. Again, you'll see that here there is a difference, but then otherwise they get parallel. The peak of the summer, again, the difference increases, and as it falls down, the difference gradually increases to an extent that here in the month of Jan, the difference is the highest. Okay, now all of these are not the northern hemispheric cities. Okay, you'll see that for northern hemisphere, your summer starts in March, April, May, June, July, August, and say up till September. It depends. Okay, if you are nearer to the equator, then it will push all the way towards October also, like it happens in India. But if you are away from the equator, you will see that your winter will start much, much earlier also. So it could start mid-August for some places. So you'll see that here itself, it has already started falling. But what I mean to say is, if this is for the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere is going to be absolutely opposite. What is summer for the northern hemisphere is actually winter for the southern hemisphere. Okay, and what is winter for the northern hemisphere is actually the summer for the southern hemisphere. These are some things of common sense that you have to keep in mind when you are studying atmosphere and weather and climate and so on and so forth. So because both these places are in the southern hemisphere, you see that it's going to fall down. The temperatures come as low as what should we say, around 14 degrees as far as Cape Town is concerned. In what should that be? That's in July. Okay, you'll see that it is in July that it comes down. Then it quickly rises up after that. Okay, towards December, when the summer arrives for the southern hemisphere, and then it starts falling once again towards its winter. Interestingly, you'll see that equator, which is much nearer to the equator, will not show you much variations, as I've already spoken about this. So these are a few things that we have to keep in mind. Having kept these 5 places in mind, it becomes easier to understand what the game of energy would be as far as different places on the surface of the earth is going to be all about. Okay. Now understanding this or keeping this in mind, let us move ahead. As when we speak about high temperatures, when we speak about low temperatures, what exactly are we speaking about? Okay, it is temperature, let me tell you, is a measure. Okay, temperature is a measure of the average kinetic energy of atoms and molecules in a substance. Okay, you'll see that when it gains energy, and as far as measurements of temperature are concerned, let me tell you a few interesting points. And I want you all to answer me as such. Okay, now when we speak about temperatures, we write temperatures in degrees centigrade, degrees Fahrenheit, and degrees Kelvin. I think Pritham spoke about this yesterday as such. Now, what are the bases of each of these? Can anybody tell me what are the bases of each of these? Okay, this is called as Celsius. Okay, I think I told you all yesterday that this is something related to these people were.
These are surnames.
Yeah, these are surnames. Okay, Kelvin as such. Now, Celsius is also at times called as centigrade. Anybody who would reflect on what centigrade would mean? Because we need to know what exactly we are doing when we use the measure degree Celsius for measuring a temperature at a particular place. We should know what exactly, where does it come from? Centigrade. Centi means what? Centi. Okay, this is centigrade. And the basis of this is on what? Anybody?
Sir, the CGS system.
Okay, agreed. Centigrade in centigrade is CGS, but then what measure do you take when I'm starting at, let us say, 0 in fact, and then to 1 and all the way to 100? What is the reference substance that I take? The reference substance that I take is water, because 0 degrees is what? Freezing point of water, and 100 degrees okay. आणि this whole game, हा सगळा जो खेळ चालू आहे पृथ्वीवर, that is related to water, isn't it? And that is why we use centigrade scale. Had it been something different, would have used something different. But it is all related to water, and 0 is the freezing point of water, and 100 is the boiling point of water. And of course, in between, at 4 degrees centigrade, you have the anomalous behavior of water, which is again a miracle of nature as such, but we'll speak about it later. It's because the major liquid on the surface is water, and all this centigrade system fits very fine between 0 and 100 with reference to water, because 0 is the freezing point and 100 is the boiling point as such. That's why we use it as Celsius. We use Celsius scale as such. Okay, now degrees centigrade or Celsius, degree in Fahrenheit. Now, can you tell me what is Fahrenheit? What is Fahrenheit? Related to, just as I said that Celsius and centigrade is all about water and around it. Okay, what is the core of Fahrenheit? The core of Fahrenheit is absolute zero. Okay, go to Google and search what is absolute zero, and you would be able to understand what is this. And as far as Kelvin is concerned, you'll see that majority of the natural processes happen with water. But then if you take this apparatus to a laboratory, you would require temperatures which are much lower. Okay, and you would require a substance which would be which you would should be able to handle at lower temperatures as such. So alcohol is something that is related to this. Okay, and the freezing and the boiling point of alcohol are much different as compared to water. Okay, so when we are referring to alcohol, we will normally refer to Kelvin, degrees Kelvin. Water is degrees Celsius, and of course, when we are referring to absolute zero, then we are referring to degrees Fahrenheit as such. Okay, then the next thing we have to understand that many students fail to realize what this is. What is temperature? Anybody? बाकीच्यांनी पण सांगा रे, तोच पोरगा सारखा आपला बोलत राहतो, तुम्ही लोक काहीच सांगत नाही. What do we mean by temperature? When we say degrees centigrade, what do we mean by that? Is the temperature, say XYZ, is the degree centigrade? What do we mean by that? Let me tell you that temperature is not a value of heat. It is actually the measurement of intensity of heat.
The quantity which reflects the hot and cold.
Yeah, it's the intensity of heat. You measure the intensity of heat regarding using temperature. A very important thing along with this you have to remember is the value of temperature is relative. Can anybody tell me what do I mean when I say that the value of temperature is relative? आता मराठीचा तंतोतंत अर्थ घ्याल तुम्ही तर रिलेटिव्हचा अर्थ. So do we mean to say that temperature नातेवाईक असतं? No, nothing of that sort. Let me tell you that when we speak of basic geography, we spoke about absolute location, and we spoke about relative location, if you remember. Relative is with reference to something. Now, as far as temperature is concerned, the relativity about temperature is with reference to itself. Now, why? If that sounds confusing, let me tell you, or let me show you. Okay, let us take, this is a substance, and let us say that temperature of this particular substance is 20 degrees Celsius. Now, what feel does 20 degrees Celsius give you? Is it hot or is it cold? Or is it very cold? Or it is very hot? What do you feel? 20 degrees centigrade. In and around Pune, the present morning temperatures are around 20, let us say. Is it hot or is it cold?
Partially cold, sir. Not
partially
very hot.
Cold, yes. It's not very hot as such. Now, as against this, I write the temperature of Delhi here. Let us say temperature of Delhi today is 10 degrees centigrade. Now what do you say? 20 degrees is hot or cold?
Even colder.
Cold, sir. What, 20 degrees is colder?
No, Delhi.
Yeah, Delhi is colder, and because Delhi is colder, Pune becomes warmer. Now, let us say we go down to Kanyakumari, and the temperature of Kanyakumari is 25 degrees centigrade. Now, if I hide this, what would you say? 20 degrees is colder as compared to 25, isn't it? 20
Yes,
degrees
sir.
is colder as compared to 25. But then I keep this aside. 20 degrees okay, gets warmer as compared to this. Has the characteristic of 20 degree as an intensity change? No. But here comes the word relative. When I place two measurements either side of it, okay, the moment I say 10 degrees next to 20 degrees, 20 degrees gets warmer. And the moment I put 25 degrees next to it, 20 degrees gets colder. Okay, so when I'm saying the relativity of temperature, you have to understand that we mean relativity with that context. Understanding this relativity concept is with regards temperature is very important, because that helps us to understand the whole concept of pressure belt systems, particularly the mid latitude low pressure belts that we have. Okay, you may not be understanding the concepts of mid latitude low pressure belts, etc. right now. There's no reason that you should be understanding it. What is important is you understand what we have done today. The whole concept of temperature is relative. It's very important to understand. And then let us move ahead. Okay, you'll see that when we say heat tends to be transferred. Okay, you'll see that heat is actually divided into two categories: latent heat and sensible heat as such. Latent heat is let us speak about sensible heat as such. When you get ill, what do? You take a thermometer. You either place it in your mouth below the tongue, or you place it in the armpit. Okay. It doesn't happen that I keep looking at the thermometer, and the thermometer easily gets uh, the temperature of my body. I can't do this also. I can't do this. I have to place it in my mouth below my tongue, so that the tongue and the rest of the part of the mouth, it holds on to the temperature, or the mercury end of the thermometer. Similarly, when I'm putting it in the armpit, what happens in the armpit is my arm and my body, they hold this and they pass on the temperature. This is called as sensible temperature. You sense the temperature. You sense the temperature as such. And such thermometers, if I go up into the atmospheric layers to thermosphere, let us say, why are we calling it as thermosphere? Because it is very hot. But if I carry this thermometer, sensible thermometer, all the way up to the thermosphere, it will hardly show me any temperature, basically because the air particles around which are supposed to be giving the temperature to the thermometer are not there. They are so rare. They are so rare, okay, that they hardly come in contact with this tip to give me the temperature reading on the thermometer as such. Okay, so that is sensible heat. And sensible heat is basically a concept because of the density of atmosphere. Okay, because the atmosphere is dense and is full of all these particles, and it is these particles that carry the temperature of the atmosphere. Is because of that you can measure the temperature of the atmosphere. You take away all these air particles, you'll see that the temperature, the atmosphere will not have its temperature. Now, what is called as latent heat? Latent heat is also called as hidden heat. Now, what do we mean? See, it's written here. It is also called as hidden heat because it does not result in temperature increase. It does not result in temperature increase. You'll see that another important thing about latent heat is that it is stored in water vapor. It is stored in water vapor. You just gather the terminologies in your mind. We will give it a meaningful explanation at a later point. We have to give it because latent heat is an important concept with regards to the atmosphere of the earth is concerned. Okay, and we're going to speak about it when we speak about condensation and when we speak about evaporation and so on and so forth. Okay, to give you an example of latent heat and how it is used, you'll see that many a times it so happens that you accidentally drop water. Okay, you drop water or somewhere. You may drop it on the table, you may drop it on the ground, you may drop it anywhere as such. Okay, now if the ground is porous, the water will seep into the ground. But if it is not porous, let us say this tabletop is made up of sanmaika, and of course it is not going to be porous. So I drop some water here, and normally what we do is we clean that water. But imagine that we don't clean that water. Will that water stay there? No, the water does not stay there. Eventually, as minutes passed, as hours passed, you'll see that you will see that something is happening with that total amount of water that has fallen. After a few minutes, you'll see that the total area which the water was covering has shrunk down. After an hour, it has further shrunk down. And a couple of more hours, it has shrunk down further. And say by the end of 4 or 5 hours, again, relatively dependent on what season it is. If it is summer, that fallen water will evaporate faster. If it is rainy season, it will not evaporate faster. And that's related to what is called as relative humidity. Again, a concept that we are going to do later. We are now understanding latent heat. Now, just imagine if you take a amount of water in a pan and you heat it. Okay, unless and until you heat it, the water does not evaporate. But you have a table, okay, and you'll see that it is on this table that you have dropped some water, and you'll see that after some hours lesser amount of water and lesser amount of water, and you have not put any flame beneath it, but then it evaporates by itself. This evaporation by itself is called as evaporation due to latent heat, and the measurement is latent heat of vaporization. It is called as latent heat of vaporization. Now, interestingly, the heat, now you'll see, we can come back to this. Okay, you'll see that when water vapor, the latent heat is stored in water vapor and eventually released in the atmosphere during condensation. And when water vapor returns to liquid state during cloud formation. Okay, this is something that we have to understand very gradually. For now, you'll see that you have to remember that when we are going to vaporize this amount of water, okay, the energy which was used to vaporize this travels with the water. Okay, it travels with the water, and when this condenses into clouds, you see that that energy is liberated at that point of time. तर हे सगळं काय असतं, we are going to do it again at some other time. But then, as far as the scale of energy transfer is concerned, there are three ways in which energy tends to be transferred. It's conduction, convection, and radiation. Okay, as far as radiation is concerned, we know that the energy from the sun comes to us in the form of radiation. That we know that between the atmosphere of the earth and the surface of the sun, there is nothing in between. We call it as space. Okay, so you'll see that radiation does not require a medium. The first thing that you have to understand, okay, it does not require a medium at all. Radiation happens in all directions. Okay, you'll see that it's going into all directions. Okay, radiation is happening in all directions as such. Then, coming to conduction, conduction happens with solids, it happens with liquids. What happens in conduction? You'll see that this energy is transferred to the surface of this solid, and from this solid it will transfer itself to this handle, and gradually this handle will get hotter and hotter, and this person will have to drop it. Okay, so what is actually happening is that the energy is traveling from here and to here and to here, but the material is not transmitting. आता तुम्ही म्हणाल हे नवीन काय आणलं सरांनी, that is going to be with reference to convection. But let us remember that as far as conduction is concerned, what happens is, I'll try to show it to you. Sorry. Let us assume that you have a metal surface, which is made up of these particles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 particles as such. And I put energy at this point. I put energy at this point. The moment I put energy at this point, the particle, okay, when I what do I do when I'm putting energy into it? Okay, तुम्ही पाहाल इथे, okay, when a substance gains energy, its particles move faster and its temperature rises. Okay, so you'll see that the first particle will start moving. Okay, this will obviously move in a wavy format. Okay, now when this starts moving, of course, because this is a solid, the one next to it also has to move. Then gradually the one next to it also has to move. The fourth also will have to move, and then all the five will keep on moving in a wavy pattern. They will keep moving in a wavy pattern. Okay, as long as you keep supplying energy here, you'll see that it will keep transferring through all these points from one point, second, third, fourth. Now you'll see that what is transmitting from here to here. Okay, when this is moving, the particles are not moving. It is the energy that is transmitting, and this is called as conduction. Okay, and that is why this process is also called as conduction. The material remains where it is. The whole material remains where it is. It's only that this energy is transferred into this, and then this energy gets transferred into this and this and this and so on and so forth. It keeps on continuing. That is how you'll see that electricity also is transferred. The wires don't move, but you'll see that the electricity moves through the wires in a cyclic manner. Why is it important to understand conduction to that level? Basically because of the fact that when we come to the most common type of energy movement in the atmosphere, in atmosphere, convection is very, very important. Okay, radiation is partially important, conduction is partially important. The most important thing that happens in the atmosphere is convection. What happens in the convection? You see that I've taken this glass, this pan of water, and this pan filled of water, and then placing it on a flame. Now what happens? The energy of the flame comes to this level, and it starts heating the water here. Now see, this is liquid. Huh? What happens is this water particle gets this energy. Because it gets energy, the particles start moving faster. The temperature rises. The same thing happens in convection also. But now, because the temperature rises, okay, you'll see that it gets lighter and it starts moving to the upper layers. Okay, and its place is taken by the next particle and then the next, and you have a string of particles of water that come to the surface. आणि इकडे तुम्ही त्याला जी उकळी म्हणतो आपण कुठल्याही लिक्विडला, the boiling of that particular liquid, त्याला उकळी येणं ज्याला म्हणतो, it is when all these particles start coming up to this particular surface. Now what happens when they come to this particular surface? By the time they have come here, they have used up a significant amount of energy. They are cooler. The topmost particle is going to be cooler than the one below. This is going to be cooler than this. This is going to be cooler than this. This is going to be cooler than this. So the coolest particle is on the top now. Though it may look, and that's where relativity is important. The whole water is hot, but the particle which has come up is less hot as compared to the other. So it becomes heavy, it tries to go down, but you'll see that these particles do not allow it to go down. So it has to move to the side and it has to go down from the side. And then gradually it takes its position once again at the top of the flame. Then it's going to be again heated, and thus it forms what is called as a convective cell. This is called as convection. Okay, convection. In convection, the medium actually moves. In conduction, the medium does not move. The medium could be liquid, it could be gas also. Okay, and when we are going to apply this to the atmosphere, this is what is going to make more sense when we understand a process in the atmosphere as such. Okay, so this is something that we had to understand. When we meet tomorrow, we'll see how what we were seeing here, okay, how that is going to be affecting actually in the Earth systems as such. Okay, I'm going to stop here right now, and I'm sure you would be having some questions. You should be having some questions as such. If you have questions, you can ask me about it. I'll try to explain them as such. Yeah. Only 11 students. Okay. Anyway. Pritam Ghosh, Sumit Nanavre, Aishwarya Limay, Rohit Gaikwad, Sunil Rathod, Pratiksha Poman, Tanuja Khoth, Akshay Shilke, Rishikesh Aglave, and Tushar Kothore are the students present. 10 students present. Yeah, if you have any questions for me, I'm ready to answer them. If you don't have any questions, I have gone into a bit of details of climatology today. So, and I'm very sure about my teaching. Okay, though I know that I'm a good teacher, I'm very sure that you would not be in a position to understand everything right at a go unless and until you have learned this at an earlier point also. As a consequence, I believe you should be having some questions for me. If you don't have questions, that means that I am an excellent teacher, or you are a poor audience. Both things can happen. In just what you need to understand is the means through which energy gets transmitted. Temperature is basically a means to measure the intensity of temperature and intensity of energy. There is a relative concept in it. Then you have radiation, conduction, and convection, of which convection is very, very important as far as atmosphere is concerned. Conduction is minorly important. Radiation, yes, as far as the sun's energy comes to the earth, radiation is important. But after that, major processes, major weather phenomena are related to convection. In convection, the particle is actually moving from one place to the other. And that is what is going to be very important in understanding all the weather phenomena as such. Um, this was the gist of what we are supposed to be doing. We were supposed to be doing the whole lecture as such. If you don't have questions, I think that should be enough for the day, and I will